Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch podcast. And Ben, mate, welcome back to you.
G'day, mate. Well, look, I'm so thrilled to be back, Bryce. It's been a month so far on this little journey that I'm on, and I've been listening to all of the podcasts coming through, the winter series. It was amazing, some great stuff there, and obviously a chat with Julia Hartman last week was also pretty cool about all things tax and property, mate. So I think I can probably extend my trip, and you can keep going, and I'll worry about doing maybe some guest appearances like everyone else, and you could just take over.
It's not looking good for you, is it, mate?
No, it's terrific. I'm happy with that idea.
No, mate, it's great to have you back on the couch, but we need to set the scene. You are this is an audio production for most people listening to this, but I'm looking at you with trees in the background. There's something there I don't really recognise. I think I Googled it. Looks like sun. That looks interesting in the background there. Living in Victoria, I'm not sure what that is. And obviously you found yourself a little spot that A, has internet connection, and B, I think you might have some people around listening to your conversation too, right?
Yep. So I'm on a breakfast deck in a place called Fitzroy Crossing Lodge. So I'm in Fitzroy Crossing in the East Kimberley. It's a pretty spectacular place up here. It's quite amazing, but it's been sort of 28 nights in a camper trailer so far, going through Kakadu and Litchfield, and then into Alquestro and Lake Argyle, and down into Home Valley, Pentecost River crossing and Gibb River Road, and a few other fun things. So we've treated ourselves, Bryce, to a couple of nights in a tent, a permanent tent, as opposed to sitting up a camper trailer, which has has its own toilet and shower, which is quite unique for us. But we haven't been experiencing that. We've been doing it a little bit of the classic bush trip. Plenty of dust, plenty of rocks. One thing that Kimberley doesn't lack is a good rock, mate. There's rocks everywhere, all different types of it, millions of years old. It's just incredible up here. It's amazing country.
We've got so much to talk to you about today, and we'll talk a little bit about those adventures shortly. But mate, I'm impressed by the degree that you're willing to support your football team, because again, as an audio production, no one can see this, but I can see that you're growing facial growth that is well and truly in black and white colours. So
yeah, I've got the salt and pepper.
I'm impressed with the fanaticism there.
Yeah, I've said to myself, when it starts getting a bit beyond too much for me, I'll shave it off. So I've had, I think, in sort of 6 weeks I've been away. I've had 2 shaves, so I'm due for another one. But I thought, no, I'll get that done before we head off into the national parks again for the next couple of weeks. So it's all going well. I'm absolutely loving it,
mate, and well deserved too. Really, where you are is really going to form the discussion that we're going to have today. But before we get there, mate, it's our 350th episode today, and for most people, they just yawn at this point, and it's just another number. But for us, we often raise the bat at the 50 and the 100, just to acknowledge that, well, first of all, we probably never, ever, ever thought we'd get to 350. I think that would be fair to say. Well, the vision was never to rack up these things. It was just let's see if we can keep contributing each week and adding value to the people that we've been called to serve. And here we are, mate, 350 episodes later. How do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, to think that we were originally going to do little 15-minute snippets, and now we rabbit on for up to an hour each time we have a show. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just, I've been blessed by being able to work with you and share the knowledge that we've been able to, sort of develop and have in our war chest over the years, and also running a business in the space that we play in property finance and money management, and having literally, 80 odd staff now that allow us to also draw on their knowledge and pass that knowledge on is what makes it work for us. And we're just, thrilled that people can listen to what we have to say, because hopefully some of it's some good takeaways for people.
And the thing that I like too is that you're absolutely right that we get to hopefully contribute to the vernacular around money finance and property finance and money management. But there's also, we're playing in a space that is largely dominated by, millennials who are really savvy around podcasting, and there's a couple of middle-aged blokes like you and me that are still playing in this game and trying to have a go and trying to contribute. So that's a lot of fun. But the biggest rewards for us are clearly summer and now winter series. That brings us an enormous amount of joy to see that people are actually not just listening to us for something to do, they're actually listening to us with something to action and put into practice, which is really good. But as I said, it's kind of self-indulgent for us to bring it up because it's just a number, but it's just a nice little spot, little line in the sand to say we're proud of what we've done. We're proud of the contribution that we're making to the education of people around these topics of property finance and money management. And there you go. We've hit 350. Today, we're going to talk about your journey, mate. And it's going to be an enormous amount of fun for me. I want to set this up for our community to know that at some point throughout the journey of 350 episodes, we have touched on some of, individual parts of your story, but we're going to do it in isolation today. We're going to actually assume that no one has heard anything about your story. We're going to talk about the takeaways, and ultimately what you're living and breathing right now is something that was created in your mind first, on paper second, and now in reality, you're living a big rock in your jar. So we're going to talk about that as well. Before we do, Ben, I just want to talk about last week's episode with Julia.
Yep.
I know you mentioned that you'd been listening to it and keeping up to date with that. Two things. One, it was fun to catch up with her. Interesting, the dynamic when it's just me, mate, because normally you and I are bouncing off each other when we've got a guest, but I'm trying to run the run sheet and make sure I'm getting all the stuff out at the same time.
You're doing a great job, mate. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, sounds like a blatant call for a plug, but I wasn't looking for that. But Julia, I put her on the spot last week and I said, buyer's agency fees, are they deductible in Canberra? And she sort of looked and she went, And then, but she's followed it up, and she has, as you'd expect from a subject matter expert like Julia, she went to the nth degree, came back, folks, it's not deductible in Canberra for BA fees. So just wanted to make sure we cleared that up. It's really, really important that we do that. Second thing, Ben, is we talked about our tax business within our own business. So just again, a shout out to, there's two groups of people who listen to this podcast, clients and non-clients. So just a shout out to our clients that we are very, very keen to talk to you to help you maximize the amount of deductions that you can possibly get so that we can put more money into your offset account and help you manage your cash flow. So just again, a shout out that our tax planning business is open to help you with that. And for those of you that are not our Empower Wealth clients, if you have an interest in us helping you with your tax return, you can go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tax, leave some details there. We have some limited opportunities, Ben, to help, given that we have pre-existing commitments to our Empower Wealth clients, but we do know that our community of property investors have been letting us know for some time that they are interested in talking to a tax accountant that specializes specifically in property. And clearly that's the space that we play in. So if that's you, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/tax, leave your details, and we will we'll let you know if there's an opportunity, and we'll also let you know in advance for next year. But that's an exciting time for us too, Ben.
Yeah, it's a super time, Bryce. I mean, it was one of the main projects that I worked on before I took long service, and I'm super excited by where we're going with our suite of services in basically the fulfillment of lifestyle design, which is what we're talking about today, and tax does play a part in that, and certainly it's an extension of money management, and there are some legitimate tax claims that people can make that will help them with a cash flow point of view. So I'm thrilled that it's now part of our suite of services, and it's about bringing that group of trusted advisors around you with that subject matter knowledge that allows us to do that important preparation and planning. And so for those of you who are also non-clients, I mean, when you are thinking about your property strategy, you are going to have to make decisions about the type of vehicle that you use, whether you do it in a personal name or through a company or a trust and those types of things. So it's an important conversation, and being able to have that with your trusted tax partner and getting their opinions and views on the types of structure that you want to move forward with. And we see even in, the tax space that there are some people spruiking more complex structures, which from an accounting point of view will help them earn their accounting fees. And in some cases, we don't necessarily agree that you need to have super complex structures, but we do need you to be informed. And so if you are talking to your tax accountant, understand where they're coming from. And one of the other things we've also learned throughout our journey is, and we're really clear on this, is around when you're getting tax advice, that you shouldn't be making all your investment decisions around tax. There is a bigger play here, and that is if you are paying tax, you're doing very well. So we do say minimize tax, but ultimately the reason why you're investing is to create a passive income so you can design the lifestyle that you're trying to enjoy. So I'm really excited about, that opportunity for our clients, and for anyone who's thinking about getting a great tax advisor. Yeah, we'd love to be able to have a conversation with you based on our availability.
Thepropertycouch.com.au/tax is where you need to go for that, Ben. Now, negative gearing, I just want to let everyone know to stick around to the end of our podcast today, Ben, because we are going to cover what's recently happened in the space of negative gearing. I hinted at it in last week's episode. We're going to have a little deep dive into that a bit later on, Ben, in What's Making Property News. So make sure that you stick around to the end for that. But my Mindset Minute theme today, Ben, with the mindset and also with my life hack today, as I was preparing it, I'm channeling you, what you've done. I think you are an inspiration for a lot of people who will listen to this today. And so I'm trying to think, okay, how do I get these two things to match up to the topic that we are talking about today? So Jack Canfield, who's the co-author of the Chicken Soup for the Soul series, which I read when it came out in the 90s. I'm recently reading a couple of the other ones, Ben, usually at night, just to fill my mind with good stuff just before I nod off for the night. And this quote from him came up, and I thought it's pretty good when I think about you, right? So the biggest rewards in life are found outside your comfort zone. Live with it. Fear and risk are prerequisites if you want to enjoy a life of success and adventure. And I think as you have demonstrated success over many years, Ben, and now you're living a 8 to 9 week adventure fueled period with your family, I think that's really relevant, right? Because you went outside your comfort zone, you embraced any fear and mitigated any risk that was relevant to you so that you could live a life full of success and adventure. So I really wanted to set up today's podcast with a frame of mind around that, Ben, because I think you do have to get out of the well-worn lane to be able to enjoy what we're going to talk about today with you. But how did that land for you, mate?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously a compliment that sometimes you think, well, it sits comfortably with me now. But I mean, ultimately, when you're going through life, and I turned 50. That's part of this trip as well. On this trip, you do gain a fair bit of knowledge over the journey. So if I'm a 21-year-old trying to, have a conversation around where I sit right now, is that time is very valuable when it comes to wealth creation. But I'm also realistic in saying that not every move has been a perfect move, and sometimes getting out of comfort zones is also not easy to do, right? You've got to do some work on yourself, hence why we talk about mindset. And you've got to have a support network around you to be able to do that, because you will come to situations where you feel that you're too far stretched, or that you may not necessarily want to keep going. And I think for me, it's having people like yourself, Bryce, and the team has accelerated that view on basically risk taking as I've grown, because I grew up in a household, mate, where we didn't take too many risks, and we'll tell my backstory in a minute. But it is about training a new focus, and I've learned that the planning part of it has been really, really valuable for me, because when you do put your mind to certain things and you apply yourself and you have a go, you can really you can achieve pretty incredible things.
Nice. I'm going to come back to one of the things you just said shortly, but really, folks, today is all about Ben's journey. We are a podcast that helps people with lifestyle design. We're not interested in you getting loads of money in the bank for loads of money in the bank's reason. We are very, very clear on having big rocks in the jar, having a vision and a focus on what your lifestyle is. And for each person, it's different. Because what I did notice, Ben, is you didn't say at any stage that you've been in 5-star hotels, swimming by the pool. You know, for you, it's about being with your family in a camper trailer, going through some amazing wilderness. And for other people, it's going to be going into 5-star accommodation and everything in between, right? So the important thing about what we would like our podcast to stand for is how to create a lifestyle that you've designed, that you have lived on purpose, and you are working, well, you say plan to become what you plan to become, right? So today is all about that for you, and what that looks like. Now, Ben, again, I'm going to ask you a lot of questions that you know that I know the answer to. So that's going to be fun for you to see how you navigate that, seeing as you're only looking at me, but we're going to be talking to our community through these questions. So first question for you, mate, is this will not come as a surprise to you, because it is a question we ask a lot. But mate, can you tell us, when you were growing up, when you were a youngster, what was money discussions like across the kitchen table for you?
Yeah, so I grew up in Fundoora, or as those people who grew up, Bundoora is a fairly big suburb in Melbourne, near La Trobe University, for those of you who don't know. We call it Fundoora. It's a big suburb, right? But it was a lower middle class area, right? So my mum and dad bought in an AV Jennings estate, so it was the city fringe. They paid $13,000 for their 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. And they went about paying off debt. My dad is someone who is very focused on thinking about the future and planning for the future. So he was very much a saver and didn't necessarily want to have debt. And my mum, on the other hand, was basically raising us. So Dad worked 3 jobs for over 30 years. So he had his job at Ansett, where he was in the engineering area and did basically the heavy maintenance on the aircrafts. And he also cleaned a factory on the way to work 3 days every morning. So he'd get up very early and clean the factory, then go and do his day job. And then on the weekends and any time that he had spare, he would also do other cleaning work for shop fit outs and when new school portables were being installed in. So he basically had cleaning work. So he worked really, really hard in terms of trying to get himself into a position to pay debt down. So on that side of it, it set him up beautifully, right? Because at the age of 55, he left Ansett, and it was literally the Friday after the Thursday. So he retired on the Thursday when he turned 55, and then the following Friday the airline collapsed. So it was quite an interesting time for him and obviously all the people around him, having worked 37 years at Ansett. So I learned a lot from him in regards to work ethic and applying yourself and so forth. But also on the other side, coming back to what was discussed at the dinner table, there was more often than not arguments about money because Mum wanted more money for groceries, more money for us boys, because we eat a lot when we're growing. And so my memories of our dinner table conversations weren't necessarily around how well we were going or, the good use of money and controlling money. It was more of Dad, being the traditional, he grew up in a single child household. My pop was a prisoner of war. He married late. He was an older man. And so there was a lot going on in his mind around how he wanted to support us. And he felt security was the number one thing that he wanted to provide for his family. And that meant money in the bank and not necessarily taking too many great risks. On the other side, Mum looked after the family budget and she needed money to pay for things, right? And so I always thought to myself when I got a little bit older in my teenage years that I didn't want to necessarily be in a household where money was argued about. And it wasn't constant arguments and stuff. It was just every now and then there'd be flare-ups. And those flare-ups stuck with me in terms of, wow, this whole money thing has a real, plays with our state of mind. And I just felt from that point of view that there was more that needed to be put on the table because it was confusing for Jeremy and myself. We're very different people, you know, as most siblings are. We've got our different sort of views on the world, and so I took it on board. It really gave me levels of anxiety that I didn't like. I think my brother was a lot more relaxed and chilled about the whole thing. But the other part
what
about...
What did you take on board? You said it caused you anxiety.
Well, just the worry, right? Do we have enough money? Is there, you know, so I was trained around money controlling people. And that took a long time for me to break that mold. Once I started doing work on myself in my early 20s around that. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, you know, I don't want to paint this picture. We lived a very, very nice lifestyle. I mean, the reason why I'm traveling and camping now is because most weekends and so forth, we go up to the border or go camping in Yarrawonga, and eventually, you know, Mum and Dad bought their dream property up in Yarrawonga, and that's where they've retired to. So the work that has been put in by Mum and Dad, and Mum worked at Avis and did also part-time work, so it wasn't all just Dad bringing in the income. They worked really, really hard, and we had some incredible opportunities as part of that, right? And this is probably where travel is in my DNA. We traveled to America when I was 13, and we did a sort of a road trip, which inspired me. I saw the Grand Canyon. We went to Disneyland. We went to Universal Studios. I mean, I still have, Yosemite National Park, the big redwoods just outside of San Francisco. Just incredible journey into there. And we did a lot of travel up into Asia with my dad's airline discounts. And that I saw, I went to Hong Kong many times and into Asia. And you see the level of wealth, the extreme level of wealth at one end when you're seeing, you know, Ferraris and Lamborghinis driving around Hong Kong, and you're going, seriously, in traffic jams, why do you need those types of cars? Versus, you know, when you go into, you know, Vietnam and some of the more poorer countries, you've got, unfortunately, you know, heaps of poverty and despair, and you see, you know, beggars and you know, people who are disformed bodies on skateboards, who are using not their limbs but their stumps to get around, and you know, they are being completely supported by other people who may not be in a great position themselves. So you know, those types of images of people getting on with it and making good of what they've got, but also that level of wealth and also that level of despair that you see out in the community has stuck with me all of this time, in terms of, so I've never really aspired to have, you know, an extreme level of wealth or anything like that. But what I aspired to was not being in a situation where we wanted to have to worry about money, that we weren't having arguments or discussions around that. And we needed to get organised in terms of how we did that. And that's the journey that I went on. You know, Dad invested in shares and had some, you know, some really good results. He invested in property. Mum and Dad invested in property. They didn't have as great results. And so I think from those experiences that I've looked at, I thought that, you know, he had a good team around him from a share point of view, that he did well. He had a financial planner that he worked with that did well. But when he went outside of those realms and sort of tried to do something himself without necessarily some support around him, and he did some joint ventures on property and a few other things, they didn't go as well. And I don't know whether he made any money out of those types of things. So I always felt that there was a lesson in that as well, in terms of every time he got professional help, things went pretty well for him, versus doing it on his own. So I took a few things away there. So I've been really fortunate that my parents have supported me, taught me the basics of humanity and shown me those experiences, and I'll be forever grateful for that work. But also I've taken some other lessons in terms of, I didn't necessarily want to have money controlling me. I wanted to ultimately learn the mindsets that you needed to be able to allow you to control money.
The one thing I'm interested in before we, okay, I'll come back to that actually. So when you've seen these discussions over the dinner table, you're watching your dad, which is remarkable, right? Job on the way to work, finishes work on Friday, has another job on the weekend, right? So amazing sort of dedication to his family. But the tax from that you were seeing across the dinner table around some of the flare-ups, as you say. What did that do for you as a money manager? Let's call it, late teenagers and then early into the 20s. What was some of the conditioning that you took on? What was there any conscious trying to unravel the conditioning? How did you manage the money? Did you manage it as tightly as your dad did early days? Talk us through that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was a saver. Like I learnt the work ethic, and I learnt the ability to put money away. And I did see Dad investing in shares, but I'll be honest with you, in terms of it wasn't something we discussed openly. I'd ask a few questions about, the shares that he's got. When I turned 16, 17, I always enjoyed business and commerce. And so I studied economics and accounting and just general business, associate diploma of business as I was getting older. And I think from that point of view, I was always focused in on this idea that you got to save, and you got to, but it was actually Noel Whittaker's book, Making Money Made Simple. Yeah, it was really probably, when I started understanding the nature of compounding and putting money aside and pay yourself first principles and all that started me on that learning journey. And, I started investing in shares, I think, when I was probably 18, 19. I was very eager to get into that space. And I just couldn't feel comfortable about the volatility in that particular area, right? I would, BHP would have a record month, and the share price would go down, and I couldn't understand the mechanics of how that marketplace was working. And it wasn't until obviously I studied a bit of Warren Buffett stuff and value investing, and the fact that the share market's basically one big voting machine, right? And sentiment plays a significant part in terms of how prices operate on the share market outside of fundamentals, and learning the principles that we don't, in economic theory, you normally have this idea that a market is always in a correct reading of what value should, open market should have a correct reading of valuations, and it doesn't. It simply does not. And so that took me a lot of time to work through that. And then, but it was playing with my mindset in terms of, I didn't like this idea that I was working hard for money. I was putting that money, I was investing that money, and the share market was basically, punishing me in the stocks that I was picking. So I worked out pretty early that I wasn't a very good stock picker. And so I needed to find alternatives for that. But that was the mindset that, coming back to your original question, was I didn't, I took on this, be careful with money, and I definitely had this concept that it controlled me.
I always say this to people, and I say it with reverence, but like, you've been a wonderful business partner because you, even to this day, and I'll say this lightly, but you're a bit of a Scrooge McDuck, right? You and as far as business partners go, that's comforting, right? But you have played your path pretty straight, right? You're not the rags to riches guy. You are the slow and steady wins the race. Have planning, have real thought in what you do, and you really haven't had any wild fluctuations in volatility along the journey, and we can unpack that a bit in a sec. But why didn't you become susceptible to bling and fads? And what like, if I was to describe you, I always say, you're humble, you're steady, you're there's no wild fluctuations on the upside, there's no wild fluctuations on the downside. You're quite measured. So why is that, given that the backstory we've just heard is saver, anxiety, lots of jobs, all that sort of stuff that you saw? Why aren't you susceptible to bling?
It's a good question. I mean, I look at the one thing that we spent a lot of money on when I was growing up was basketball boots. So we were big into basketball. I played a lot of basketball in my so any type of sporting equipment, my parents would try and get me the best. So Dad was always happy to make sure that I had the best equipment for that. The other thing that I also noticed, on reflection, right, when we're growing up, the other thing that we had was we always had a fantastic stereo equipment. Our back room, which was our entertainment room, was almost like it was the basketball club's official function room. We had so many functions at our house in Fundoora there. The dad would, in terms of quality for sound equipment, he would always go after the very best. Don't ask me why. But other things that I need, like clothing and brands and all that type of stuff, I don't know why, but I've never, a watch is a watch is a watch. And a computer is a computer is a computer. It serves a purpose. I'm not sure that I need to have the biggest and best. Now, as I've got older and I've, built up a financial base, I can now start to think about some of those decisions to make, right? I mean, I drive a 2010 Volkswagen Golf. I might upgrade that car in the next couple of years to an electric car. I might do some of those types of things, but in those earlier days, I just, money makes money. And once I worked out that if you've got money invested for you and you put them into appreciating assets over time, you can have some of those spoiled. And what I would spend a lot of money on was experiences. So if you had a fishing charter, or if you had a holiday or a weekend away or something like that, camping or whatever, I'm in, right? And I would always find a budget for that in terms of that. But the material stuff, not so much. I've never had to worry about that, but anytime I felt that you were adding value to that material thing, so the house is an example. So, the house that we built over the last 5 years has got some nice things in it, but I'm actually thinking more about the resale value more so than, it's got a pool, it's got a couple of other things, but
can I send the value around?
yeah, exactly. So I don't know why, but I think it comes from that upbringing in terms of I've never had to worry about that. My parents were very level-headed. They didn't care too much for that. I suppose the values that they imparted to me and Jeremy was, love thy neighbour, be generous, be courteous, and you don't have to have any of that material wealth. Their property at Yarrawonga is quite stunning. The location is amazing, but the house itself is not out of this world. It does what it's functional, right? So I'm probably more of a functional person when it comes to wanting to have to spend money versus having to have the biggest and best of everything. And when I get older, I'll probably splurge a little bit more in my retirement years, but I'll also you and I have talked about this. I want to do more in the contribution place, not necessarily. I don't necessarily need to have a big boat or anything fancy like that. If I want a boat, I'd rent it and give it back if I needed to do anything like the same thing for the camper trailer and the 4-wheel drive. We're hiring that and we give it back in Broome when we finish in another month. And I come home to Melbourne and I don't have to worry about bringing all that equipment back home, which I probably then won't have time to use because we've got some exciting things that we're going to be doing over the next couple of years.
Well, mate, if I could convince you to move down to paradise here, mate, you might end up getting yourself a camper trailer. Hey, I think there is some enormous value in what you just shared, right? So I'm trying to find out where we get to the point where where the desire started. I think it started from not wanting to have anxiety in your family around money. But what was the spark? What actually gave you that North Star that you were heading for? What was that moment?
Well, I think it is about the power of compound and then also about the power of leverage. Once I, understood that you could leverage and get cash on cash return, and you could find an asset class that was less volatile and was based on a scarcity element, which is land when it comes to property. All of those things started to make more and more sense to me in my early 20s. And that's why, I'd seen how mum and dad had done well out of their property in Fundoora. I bought the house across the road when I was 23 and then spent some time in the tourism industry, which I absolutely loved because that was my passion at the time. But I was always interested in basically self-determination and making sure that I could, support my family, provide that security, but not worry about money. And so it still took, another decade of investing and that mind management and mind shift around building up that asset base. And it just rolls on. once you start to understand that, and then you also understand that, you know, as much as I've strived to get the best investment properties that I possibly could and make the best investment decisions I could make at that time, probably the biggest advantage that I've ever had of all is the fact that I just did something and that I had a go. And then, you know, those properties have done very, very well. And then you lift your eyes in a decade's time and, you know, there's a couple of $100,000 on each of those properties that has grown, and away you go. But then you start getting more serious about your life. And when you find your life partner and you start thinking about what does that story look like, and you're responsible for other people, things change again.
Because that was a big part for you around that planning. I'll get to that in a sec. What is your what's the derailer for you? What's the monster under the bed for you? Because you've had a clear vision. You know what you want to do. Has anything been the potential to derail you, or are you just like, nah, I know where I'm going? Because you're not seduced by bling. You're not seduced by fads. You are a Scrooge McDuck. You are level-headed. What's the enemy for you?
Oh, I don't think there is one. I mean, like in terms of going about, you know, investing, there's always a buffer. There's always something. There's a back piece there. Now, I'll tell a story around. I was in a relationship in my early 20s, and that relationship fell over, and I was a little bit, you know, sort of anxious and, you know, concerned about where my future was going. And I started a business very, very early in the piece, you know, in computers and commercial furniture. And that business didn't go too well. I had a lot of business partners in that. I was quite stressed at that time. So I went and got some professional help, you know, in terms of a combination of those things. And I took an opportunity to get out of that business. It was tough. It was stressful. That relationship broke down. And then I put myself into uncharted territory. So coming back to, you know, your motivational comment earlier on, your minute, your mindset minute, that put me into uncharted territory. I went and worked in a bar, did some cocktail training, and flew up to the Whitsundays and got a job on Hamo. But, you know, so I was completely outside of my comfort zone then. And, you know, within 12 or 18 months, I was the night manager of the resort. Then I became, you know, one of the national sales execs, and then ultimately the sales manager of Hamilton Island for Australia and New Zealand. So that gave me a lot of confidence in the fact that I could show that I could put myself into a restarting position and then go again. And that in itself just says, and I remember a comment from a great mentor of mine, a personal friend who was successful in business, and he said, cream always comes to the top. And that just gave me some confidence to say that he'd seen what I'd been able to do and get through that. And I think, again, if you've got, whether it's family or a close friend or someone who is successful, reach out to them, and because they can give you that confidence. They can also tell you about the pros and cons of what you're about to do. And ever since that time that I was able to then move up in my professional career into a middle management, senior management role, I've felt pretty confident that I'd be able to land on my feet if things didn't go well. And that's probably gave me that confidence to do what I did.
So, and a special thanks to that couple that are having breakfast with you. We get a little insight into their conversation as well. But yes. So who you mentioned a mentor then, right? So in business, what about property? What was the early? You know, clearly you talked about you didn't want the volatility. For you, you like to control the risk. Who are the early mentors for you? Whether it was a book or a course or a person?
Yeah, well, I literally got anything I could get my hands on. I would read anything from the API magazine, which is Australian Property Investor, no longer around. All of the property books, Margaret's books, Margaret Lomas, that is. Obviously, you've got, Ian and Jan Summers, Jan Summers' books. There was also Residex, John, I'm trying to think of his surname now. No,
Oh,
well,
John Edwards.
John Edwards, thank you,
Yeah.
John Edwards. I listened to a speech, but I also, saw the spruikers and all of the get rich quick guys and all that type of stuff. And
tell us about the spruikers influencing, because they were pretty big back then, and it was you probably started BG, before Google. So
Yeah.
the spruikers, where a lot of information was for us back then.
Yeah, they were massive. I mean, ultimately, you had quite a lot of them. Obviously, the Henry Kays, the Peter Spans. There are still some active, which I won't name them, but there's still plenty of them out there, right? Who are doing this type of get rich quick and promoting these types of opportunities, which for me, just didn't have the fundamentals. So, some Ed Chan also was interesting. I listened to him speak once, and then I went and had a consult with him. So I wasn't necessarily keen on spending tens of thousands of dollars in signing up to their courses. But what I was interested in is having one-on-one conversations with these people. And so I had a consult with Ed. He gave me some insights, and I paid for his time. And so
he's a good guy too. We're not suggesting he's a spruiker.
No, that's right. No, he's very much been, in sort of the Chan and Naylor guys. Back in the day, they were operating Monique Wakelin and the Wakelin. I'd seen a couple of her presentations and understood the fundamentals that she was sort of looking at. Obviously, Jeremy Shepherd has also been another one who's now, part of our family, and in terms of some of the work that he's been doing and the data crunching he's been doing. So the spruiking stuff is pretty simple, right? They prey on your vulnerabilities. They get you excited in a room, and they basically stack the value, and they try and sell you on that opportunity, because they know once you actually get your level and rational mind back, you probably wouldn't sign up for them, and the value really isn't there. And I say that to anyone who's looking to work with these universities. They've got really interesting names. They try and call themselves educators, but at the end of the day, they're trying to basically get a buck out of you. And all the simple question you want to be asking yourself is this, in terms of what's in it for me. I can see what's in it for them. What's in it for me, and how much support am I going to get? And if they're doing, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people in these seminars, you're just going to be another number. And ultimately, you're not going to get that one-on-one tailored advice that you need.
The problem, as you know, Ben, is spruikers have got 90% of the stuff right. So that's the confusing part. That mindset, you've got to have the right mindset. You've got to leverage. You've got to plan for the future. So most of what they say is actually admirable. But as you say, it's that last 10% where, unfortunately, it's the Pareto principle. Even if we do 80-20, right? 80% of it's right, but the 20% is where most of the downfall comes. So you've obviously been a student of the game. You've spent hours and hours reading, listening, watching, observing. Back in the pre-podcast, pre-video age, it was back in the turn up to the hotel and watch all these spruikers. So then you didn't succumb to that. You've invested in property. It served you well, but there was a particular moment for you that I'd love for you to share, is when you found your beautiful wife, Jane, and then it was all about having a look into the crystal ball about the future. Can you tell us a bit more about that story?
Yeah, well, I mean, coming back to the 10,000 hours, that's what I did. I mean, I'll just quickly, I've got scrapbooks of, I used to walk around suburbs and letterbox drop saying, I want to buy a house. I would study a suburb pre-internet, pre-Google, and just literally track property prices and everything I could possibly do manually. And so, yes, there's a lot of that time that was spent there in terms of analysing different marketplaces and doing that. And so that did give me the confidence that I had some idea about the property space. So, obviously I meet Jane, we're getting serious, we decide, we get engaged and we're going to get married. And this is when the planning does come in. So it's very easy to plan when you're by yourself, right? Because you can have flexibility. But then the conversation is around, well, what's important to us? What are the big rocks in the jar? What are the things we're trying to do? And for me, by this stage, I had become a mortgage broker, and I had a mortgage choice franchise for a couple of years there. And then I'd started Empower Wealth with this view of a holistic advisory firm. So the idea was, when I saw all these spruikers and then I had these mixed messages, and this is what happens, right? You'll go and speak to one person and he'll say this thing, and the next person will say this thing, and then you'll go and speak to an accountant and they'll say this. It's just not coordinated. And again, 80% of it makes sense, but it's that extra 20% that really, is the icing on the cake. So the vision was an integrated advisory firm that would be able to pull all this together. But coming back to the personal situation we're in, Jan and Ian Summers' PIA software was excellent, right? In terms of analysing an individual property and seeing the cash flows inside the property. But we're on a journey. Like we wanted to buy a principal place of residence. We wanted to build up, get on the property ladder and find that ultimate dream home down the track. So there was all these moving parts, how many children, what we were going to do. And so when I can't see a clear pathway, I want to get to the data and I want to get to the detail to be able to inform me, right? So it's we talk about making the invisible visible. And so I went looking at in the marketplace for software that could do what I wanted it to do, which was basically model a property portfolio and do it with cash flow analysis and that type of thing. And there just wasn't anything out there. So I'd done a home trader share trading course and met a gentleman by the name of Michael Pope, who's now a partner in our business. And Michael is a genius when it comes to Excel. And so we were going to build this prototype. And so we had a handshake agreement that he would come in 3 days a week and we'd basically go into a room and we'd just map out basically everything that we needed this thing to do. And so I was the architect of all of the different pieces, and he was the genius in terms of putting all of the formulas and the numbers together to be able to give us some forecasts. And so the brief that we put together was we wanted to measure cash flow movements every month, and we wanted to basically be able to show impacts of offset accounts and all different types of variables. We needed indexation to run through it. We needed all the tax regulations and so forth to run through it. And so that was quite a fascinating exercise in itself. And so it took about 9 months before we got to our very, very first version of this. And I remember running Jane and my scenario through it for the first time. Now, this thing took 6 minutes to calculate. So you could imagine, so once you put all the variables in, so there's about 43 variables in the first version. We put all those variables in and we hit calculate, and you have to wait 6 minutes for it to crunch all those numbers.
Cue the elevator music.
Yeah, exactly. We worked out that it was going to do about 230,000 calculations in the background, right?
Yeah.
And so we were like, this is great. Like, we're building something here that we think is going to be able to help people. But could you imagine actually sitting down and having small talk for 6 minutes each time you wanted to change a variable? Oh, you want another child? Or, well, okay, let's talk about the weather. Let's talk about the footy. Anyway, long and the short of it is, we did a couple of iterations of that. And then finally we got to a pretty good working product that allowed us to do these formulas. And then what we did is I wrote the strategy documents around the different types of strategies. So the 18 strategies in the book around capital growth and yield and getting all of those things right. So we put all that stuff together. So it took us about 3 years to eventually build something out. But for Jane and my point of view, coming back to my story, we were able to articulate a plan which had $140,000 passive income by the age of 50. And that allowed us to work through having 2 children, putting those kids through schooling, private schooling as well, based on the income that Jane and I were generating at the time. And so that was the first model which we signed off on, because again, I was the guinea pig running these programs in 2009 that we started to do that. Now, as I said, we continued to work on that, but that was the story. That's basically it. So all of a sudden we made the invisible visible, and we had a clear way in which to do that. And that's where also Michael explained to me a money management system that he used to put his 3 children through private school, when technically it was near impossible to do what he did. I mean, in terms of our elite money managers Popey, Michael, is one of the greats. And so we then designed the Money Smart system around those principles, and we've evolved that to, to obviously being really one of the preeminent money management solutions that are available in Australia. In my humble view, it is by far the best system to trap money, and to also then get into a routine to change habits and behaviours. And really that is the secret, right? It is about creating habits and behaviours to be able to organise the cash flows, and then the rest just takes care of itself.
It is. We combine James Clear's Atomic Habits with money management and break it all down to very simple, replicatable habits that mean that you manage your money. Hey, there's so much in that, right? Which I could go off on tangents, but early in our discussion, you very early in the discussion, you said the way that you mitigated risk is through planning, right? So I think through that story that you just shared with us was around, okay, I was on my own, but then Jane came along, and then we starting to think about the future. Is this how you reconciled that anxiety that you felt when you were out of control, whereas now you had a better sense of going, well, I'm very clear on where I want to go, and now I'm actually clear on what the month to month looks like from a cash flow perspective. So therefore, risk is really a measure of knowledge, and you've now really dumbed it down as to what the methodical steps are that you need to take to actually get to where you are. Was that a big part of it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, originally I was a low risk person, hence I went into residential property, not into the share market. I wasn't aggressive in my investment strategies. I let time do the heavy lifting. And in those earlier plans, we put in some buffers, right? So we had 12 months of cash flow buffer if something was to go wrong. If the business failed, we could get back on our feet. Obviously, we had, I think, 2 properties at that point. So we were in good shape in terms of where we were heading. So there was a wealth base behind us, and we were ready to take that next step. So if I was to rate myself, my risk profile, even in my sort of early 30s, was still probably at that sort of moderate risk profile, as opposed to a high risk profile. Now, as the wealth base has continued to grow, and we adjusted. In 2016, we adjusted that model from 140,000 passive income to 190,000 passive income by the age of 50. You have been able to take some more risks, right? And the business has gone well, so that's changed a few things as well, right? So I think from that point of view, and I can just. I mean, I've got, as I said, it's a bit weird, right? I've got people sitting on either side of me. So I'm talking to my computer, and they're probably hearing this whole conversation go, who is this guy? Because I'm sitting out on a breakfast deck.
Well, I've seen a couple of guys tap me on the shoulder with a pen and a paper. They're probably wanting autographs, mate.
So it is a little weird talking this way, and that's probably why I'm talking a little bit softer than normal as well, and I'm not as animated for those who are listening.
Every now and then we get a gush of wind come through, and then it blows on your microphone, and then we hear the birds and everything. So, mate, we've got a bit of everything here.
Yeah, so yeah, well, that's authentic, right? So that's where it sits in terms of we've done very, very well in being able to plan for the future. And execute on that plan. And this trip to the Kimberleys was something that Jane and I had talked about 5 years ago, before my 50th. And we started to put all of the wheels in motion. Now, we originally wanted to go for 3 months and also do a bit of the Coral Coast as well. But at this stage, we've got 2 months up here in the East Kimberleys, and, the kids are having a life experience that again, my parents allowed me to do camping trips and get some of those experiences out in the bush and in nature and those real life experiences. And I'm just pleased to be able to pass that on to my boys in terms of at 9 and 10 years of age. Some of it's lost in translation. They're still probably rating their experience by some of the pools in some of the caravan parks that we've gone to. But I mean, the gorges and the swimming holes and all of those other things that they've seen, and the sunsets and the rock formations. It's just nuts, right? I mean, this joint, is just frontier country, but it's just so beautiful in its own way. The greens against the reds and the dust, and it's just out of this world in terms of you know, some of the amazing landscapes up here, and the changing landscapes between different locations is just insane.
Just insane, mate. I talked to you today is midweek. I talked to you earlier in the week, and I was jealous when you said, "Oh, mate, just what a relief. We finally got a 28 or a 29 degree day, because these mid 30 days were killing us." I'm thinking, mate, I can't remember what it feels like to be warm. Hey, back then, Ben, when we started before podcasts, a lot of the strategy was around buy property and actually create equity and use equity to service debt, so that you could not only buy the next property, but also fund a lifestyle through the debt. So your debt was growing, but also was your value was the on paper theory. So therefore it would sustain you. And interestingly, now fast forward a couple of decades, and it just wouldn't stack up in the current lending environment. Back then, it was really strong. Now, there's a couple of things I want to pick up on. You obviously talked about, you know, you put some plans in place. What was interesting and unique at the time, which now is kind of our clients really have the beneficiary of these early pioneering days. But back then it was back of napkins. Oh, if you've got some equity, then you should buy a property. Or as you say, the software at the time was elite, but it treated properties in isolation. And I always say anyone in this country who's got a material income generally wants to invest it in real estate, because the fact that the basic need is shelter. That shelter forms usually our biggest asset. Therefore, anyone with money needs to be putting it, unless you've got inheritance or lotto wins, into a mortgage, right? So it doesn't make sense to treat these decisions in isolation. And it was what you were pioneering at the time, where not only do I want to work out if I can buy an investment property and when I can buy the next one, but also how I fund foundational costs in my life, but also stuff that comes up. I want to renovate the kitchen. I want to upgrade my car every 10 years. I don't know if I can afford to send my kids to private school. And in your case, I want to put a big rock in the jar and go on my 50th and cut a lap at the top of the country, right? So talk us through a little bit about the strategy, early days. And I'm talking about you specifically more so than the business, but you know, I'm happy to tell everyone you're my mentor from many years ago around, it's all about retiring out the debt, because I was just like buying properties and just going on this ever chasing need to service debt with debt, right? But then ultimately we pivoted to retiring out debt, and also changing mindset from not only just buying growth properties, but there is actually two other categories: balanced properties and yielding properties as well. So talk us through the early days of your thinking there around the strategy.
Yep. So coming back to the 140 target by 50. So the best part about that was I had a lot of time up my sleeve, but I'd also started early, right? So having a strong equity position and a low LVR meant that I had some flexibility around what that looked like. And even with the big rock in the jar being the dream home, in terms of what we were prepared to pay for that dream home when we set the goal to sort of buy that dream home in 2013, we were able to buy at a slightly higher price point because our income was a little bit stronger than we anticipated. So the planning is still going to be flexible, right? So you should still be reviewing a plan. A good, solid, hard designed plan should be still reviewed every sort of 12 to 18 months in my mind, right? It's still, most of it's set and forget once you get into that routine and the habit. But that was probably the difference for us. So we bought the property in Alexandria. Well, bought Fundoora first, got that bad bit of property advice, and sold that one. Well, I should still have that one.
We'll put a link in the show notes, Ben, because there's an article about that
the $600,000 or $700,000 mistake now.
So we'll put a link to that so people can get access to it.
One day it'll be $1 million mistake.
Yeah. Let's be honest, it's going to provide you with ongoing, continuing pain until you move on, buddy.
Then we bought the property in Alexandria when I was living in Sydney and working in the tourism industry. So that was also one of the stepping stone properties. Then we bought a property in Flemington, which was again a high growth asset. So Alexandria and Flemington have been very much high growth assets. Then we bought the property in Moonee Ponds, which was a renovator's special. It was a beautiful cow bungalow, 1927 brick cow bungalow, but in original condition. So that's the work that we've done. So when we originally set about the renovation budget for that, we had a $500,000 renovation budget for that. That did increase. We were in a position, fortunately, to increase that in 2015 and 2016 when we started those renovations on that particular property. But to give you some context, we lived in that property for 2 years with a lean-to kitchen that would not have been out of place in the 1950s. Very, very basic. In fact, I put a commercial sink in there just because the sink was one of the very old, very, very thin, low base, crappy. So yeah, Jane had to put up with a little bit of hurt as we then designed, the property that we wanted to live in, and those changes were occurred because our incomes were better than we anticipated. So we're always careful in terms of the assumption of our incomes, and we always probably overstated expenditure by about 5% when we were doing that. Then came the self-managed super fund purchases, so starting to focus on cash flow properties. So there's Cairns, which yields about 10.8%, and the Broome property yields about 8% at the moment. Bought them right at the bottom. So to give you some idea, it sold at $912,000 the last time that sold in Cable Beach, and I picked it up for $580,000. So those two are in the self-managed super fund. Then there's a block of flats in Brisbane, and this is coming now into the cash flow story, right? So there's a recent purchase. They've got some really easy value adds to do. There's no private courtyards or private use areas, so I want to put some private use areas onto those, and then also renovate the kitchens and bathrooms. So that's a block of 5 2-bedders in Brisbane, and recently a purchase in a 50% purchase with Jane's parents of a beach shack, which is about 800 metres from the beach in Rockingham in WA. So that portfolio of properties has now got a rent roll of 199,000 and growing, just to give you some idea. Now, I've never talked about my property portfolio in detail, so this is the very first time I've done that, but it just gives you an idea in terms of what I've done. Boring. I haven't bought a lot of properties over a lot of period of times. When I said on the podcast that I'm currently active and looking for a property, I buy a property. But there's a lot of times where for years on the podcast, I haven't mentioned anything because we haven't been looking. But that rounds out the portfolio, and that basically gives us the comfort. And now it's about retiring the debt out. The Rockingham property is an interesting property because it's on a 1/4 acre block. And as I said, sort of 800 metres from the beach. So that could have an opportunity to put some townhouses on it. But at this stage, it's just a comfortable shack. And it's just going to continue to keep renting out, and we'll see what happens with the land demand in that area. And the longer I hold on to it, the more scarcer it becomes, because there's less and less of those 1/4 acre blocks that are available in that particular area, because they are all getting knocked over, and some houses, new houses, and some townhouses being built on those. So I'm in no rush to do anything with that, and that's it. So here I am sitting here, sort of 3 weeks from my 50th. In pretty good shape.
You're in good shape. I remember the Rockingham jetty a lot, Ben. I spent a lot of my youth swimming at that beach. But mate, that's one of the key takeaways I want to land from what you have just described is that the myth around what financial independence looks like is well and truly entrenched in the psyche of flash cars, fast toys, all those sorts of things. But ultimately, when it all comes down to it, what people want is control of their time. And in my view, and I don't want to project onto it, people just want to have the lifestyle of what they perceive a millionaire has. And so, which could mean that you do want all the flash, right? But then you've got to have a quick look at why that's driving you. But ultimately, it's around I don't necessarily want what they have. I just want to have the ability to do what they can do, which for you is to do what you're doing. And I'd really love for that message to land, that lifestyle design doesn't have to be anything other than what you want it to be. So you don't have to do the comparison game. And also it's really about accumulating all these experiences. And you're not a billionaire, Ben, but you are financially independent. You are financially wealthy. And I think that's an important message for people to percolate and land.
Yeah, I think now what's exciting for me is that as I said, I'm passionate about travel and those experiences, right? So we have a baseline now moving forward of $25,000 for travel. And that when the kids go through private school and are finished or go through schooling, whichever school they ultimately go to, we have provision for that. That could increase to $40,000 a year right now. That could mean some high-end experiences, but could mean, getting on, Intrepid Traveller or something like that and doing a hike through South America or something along those lines and staying in hostels. So I'll give you one example, right? There's Wyndham up here in the Kimberleys it's a ghost town, right? There's a bit of mining activities going on there, but you drive through the main town and it's got one supermarket, which is really just a convenience store. It's got a very simple sort of petrol station type thing, and there is nothing down near the port Wyndham. It's dead, right? Unfortunately, it's struggled, and but there's one bric-a-brac shop, right, and it's run by Pixie, and I mean. For me, it's experiences like meeting Pixie, and let me see if I can describe Pixie for you. First of all, the shop looks like it comes out of the early 1900s, right? So there's no actual windows on it, right? So they just open the shutters, and it's completely free open air. Yeah. And then you go inside the shop, and there's Pixie sitting at her desk, and Pixie's in her 80s. Yeah. She's got one of those, not a pipe, but she's got one of those plastic things that you stick your rolling smokes into because it reduces the amount of. But she's smoking inside her store. Yeah. Which is obviously occupational health and safety. And her bric-a-brac shop is just full of the most interesting and unique materials. From you could buy, say, a fork for 50 cents. Right through to the Diana wedding collection of her wedding to Prince Charles. It is just this fascinating, store full of interesting, trash and treasure. And you get to chat with Pixie and she tells you all about what's going on. Now, it's those types of experiences that you just, like the gorges and all that are amazing, but it's also about meeting some of those local people and just seeing the lives that they're leading and just getting a moment in time where she's just, living out her twilight years. Basically, what do you want to know? Just ask me any question. I've got an answer for you, right? Like, so it's those characters. You
go back and ask her when Freo might win their first one, mate, because that'll be nice.
So, but that to me is, because everyone's sort of saying, don't go up to Wyndham, right? There's nothing up there. And they're right. But, for an hour and a half drive up there, just have a look at the port and, just really nothing. But to meet her was worth it. It was absolutely worth it. And then going out to some of the homesteads and the roadhouses and all that type of stuff. That to me is just about getting ingrained into the Australian experience and the outback experience. And I love that.
Can you tell that guy in the truck if he hasn't got anywhere to park, if he just parked right behind you, be fine?
I know. As I said, there was always going to be a risk right where I am, but the cleanaway truck is now reversing. But yeah, because I'm in, Fitzroy Crossing, which you Google it, right? Please Google it because it is nothing. It's not even it's
out to the Fitzroy on the map. Crew.
Well, no, they'll agree with you. Like there's one coffee shop, there's one hardware store, which is a camping store and an all-to-do store. But there's not a lot here. I mean, and the people make do and they seem happy enough with what they've got, and life goes on around them. But they do have the most amazing climate in which to experience it, and the Fitzroy River itself is quite incredible, right? So no, very, very exciting.
Mate, so I guess you've used the experience of what you've talked about. We've been able to replicate that with our clients, which is something that we're super proud of, to see that at some point in the future we get a little glimpse into it with summer and winter series, and over time portfolios will mature. People will get more equity. They'll get more passive income. So then we can get more and more people on to share more and more stories like yours. So that's a wonderful way that we can contribute, right? But you've now reached the pinnacle. You're hitting 50. Your financial plan has been fulfilled. Mate, can you tell us, which is a wonderful achievement. We should pause and reflect on that. But mate, I'm super interested in, what does it feel like for you to now look back, we circle back and say, one of the things that you didn't like about childhood was fights around money. And now you can have a scenario where that doesn't have to be a part of your family dinner table. You're not sitting at Fitzroy Crossing fighting about a bill or whatever. So can you tell us what that feels like, and then the legacy piece that will mean for Jack and Harry as we talk to them in 20, 30 years' time, to ask them some similar questions around what it was like to have money conversations with you?
Bryce, it's a really great question, and yeah, it does feel quite surreal that you know that you're financially secure, that you can have choices, and you can decide basically the direction, the different things that you want to do. And I am blessed in terms of what I do, and the big focus on helping others get to where they get to is a key driver of mine. For those people who know me closely, it's a very, very powerful driver in terms of seeing people, improve their financial position. So I'm really looking forward to what that looks like. I tell you, one of the other observations that I've also made in the fact that my boys are now aware that we are, financially okay, and that we do have some finer things, like they have a nice house, and when we're traveling around, we are eating in some of the road houses, and we don't have to cook, on the side of the road every night and that type of stuff. So that is interesting. So my challenge and my opportunity there is to teach them about those values. I don't want them to get this sense of entitlement and this sense of it's okay, we've got enough money to do what we want to do. They've got to learn the value of money. They've got to learn how to appreciate it. And so that's probably the challenge that people who are in good financial positions, and it resonates with those stories about how the first generation can potentially, make good financial decisions. The second generation usually build on that, but the third generation usually is the one that because they've grown up in it and they're not attuned to, how hard it was to get there, have the risk of basically dismantling that. So I think it's coming back to the fundamentals of just teaching them and teaching them that it still requires hard work. Like, I've worked, quite hard over these years, but for me, I've done a job that I'm very passionate about. So it doesn't feel like work, but there's certainly been many, many hours of research and investing to execute. And then also, just basically in my day job in terms of what that looks like. So yeah, I think there's real comfort to know that financially we don't have to worry about money anymore. But the next part about that is just ensuring that our kids don't lose sight of basically the opportunity that they have got. And so I look forward to taking them on those traveling trips and showing them just how challenged it is for some people, and how fortunate we are in this great country to have the standing of living and the quality of life that we do have.
Yeah, nice one, mate. Yeah, the if you help the chicken peck out of the egg shell, mate, it doesn't serve them, does it? They've got to peck out themselves, because that's where the living is. So well said. So, mate, what an incredible journey that you've been on. I think it's I think it's a real privilege that I get to hang out with you a lot. But I think on behalf of the community, I reckon there's a real pioneering part for your story where people can listen to that and they can go, oh, it doesn't have to be hard or difficult or risky or listening to people with the wrong agenda. It's actually something where I reckon most people could listen to your story and relate to that. One of the unique things that you have is a really strong work ethic and and I can say this without a shadow of a doubt, you have an unbelievable heart to help other people, right? So I think those are two moral compasses that have served you well. But I just think that the detail that we've just spent some time going through just has to act as an inspiration, but also just provide people with hope that it's not about, building empires and all those sorts of things. It can actually be done while you still have normal life and keep your feet on the ground and don't lose your friends and all that sort of stuff. So, mate, congratulations. I am clearly biased, but I think you're one of the pioneers of strategy in this country and giving people hope that self-funded retirement is something that is within the reach of most people. So, mate, I tip my hat to you, mate. I know it's not your birthday yet, but well done on getting to your 50th and hitting your goals along the way. And I think I'm excited to see what this episode's going to do for our community.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate those kind words. Look, and I'll also add that when I did it, deposits weren't the big challenge that they are today. So I'm looking forward to what the next 350 episodes have around, because some of the strategies are going to have to change for some people in terms of it's just not easy to get that first deposit up. So I'm looking forward about exploring ways in which we can help those younger people get onto the property ladder, and looking at some of that sort of rent vesting and just, seeing what they can do. So there's more to come in regards to, new evolving strategies to adjust to the market condition. So from that point of view, it's going to be important.
Yeah, we're going to be sticking around, and we do have another 350 in us. So stick around, folks. All right, mate. So my life hack today is unsurprisingly linked to what we've been chatting about. So I saw this post recently and I thought it was good, right? So use the weekend to build the life you want instead of trying to escape the life you have. So you're not going to hit your goals by anesthetizing yourself via drinking, scrolling, workaholism, comparison, indifference, or insert whatever distraction device you can. So work hard now so your future self will thank you. And I guess on that, Ben, your future self, aka your 50-year-old self, is thanking you right now. So that's my life hack today: to walk the path less traveled, invest in yourself in your downtime, so that you can actually get to a place that you and I are really passionate about, lifestyle design on behalf of ourselves, for our families, but also our clients as well through residential real estate. So there you have it, folks.
Yeah, I like that, mate. It's a good one.
No worries. Thank you. What's making property news? Negative gearing, mate. I noticed they released some updates whilst you were out of town. They're a bit worried about that mortgage broker causing more dramas again.
Yeah, look, it's pleasing to see that that obviously the Labor Party is getting the message that there is an aspiring Australian group out there, right? Whether they're the silent Australians or, as we like to refer them as, aspiring Australians, and property is a vehicle which they can do what they needed to do, which is obviously what you and I are doing in terms of our lifestyle design and how we're helping others. So I'm really thankful that the Labor Party has got the message that doing any changes to negative gearing and capital gains provisions will restrict that. Obviously, that they are in the business of winning elections, and so that'll be interesting to see how some of their base responds to that. But I think, on the whole, we want our politicians to stay in the centre and basically, be a balanced group. We don't want the lefties and, the far left and the far right basically running our politics. So I think it's a great story in regards to what it means. I hope that means that the Labor Party doesn't have any other ideas around this space. And if they do, why not consult the industry before making any changes or proposing any new policy ideas? So yes, that means this policy idea is dead, but it still doesn't necessarily mean that in the future that they won't look at anything such as negative gearing tweaks or capital gain tweaks, or even potentially, some sort of death tax type tweak as well. So we just encourage the Labor Party to continue to keep moving in this space about, basically seeing hardworking Australian mum and dads Australians who have an opportunity to build out some wealth. Because ultimately, if they are going to be like you and me, Bryce, they're not going to be a burden on the Australian government when they do get to that. In fact, we'll be paying significant taxes right through our retirement years, because that income that we have been able to generate is taxable. So yes, we got that benefit early on. There's no mistaking that in terms of the negative gearing benefit that we do get, but we're also now starting to pay those taxes and paying that benefit. And that's like anyone in small business. Any sort of leg up that you can get early on means that you're then making profits or employing other Australians, and that can only be a good thing longer term for the economy. So I'm really pleased that the Labor Party have decided to drop that policy for now.
Yeah, and I think the important thing you said there was we weren't anti-tax change regime. We were anti around the disparity between new and established properties and the false promise of what they thought that would end up providing. So you're right.
Yeah.
As property investors, we can be excited about the fact that there's not going to be two tiers if they do make any changes, but there is still I guess it's not, the game's not won here. There's obviously more to be done, but at least that particular policy is no longer going to be taken to the next election, which is really, really great. So there you go, folks. The ALP not taking negative gearing changes as they did in the 2016 and the 2019 elections to the next polls, which is good update for our community. Hey mate, it's been fun. I do know a lot of the backstory, and I still really enjoyed today because it was nice to connect, nice to remind ourselves on where we've been and where we want to go and how we can help some people, mate. So thanks for checking in and sharing what you've been doing, and for celebrating our 350th with essentially what is your big rock in the jar, and living a life by design.
Yeah, thanks, mate. I mean, at the end of the day, our story is just one of hopefully many successful stories that we want to see all the aspiring Australians get to, which is to be able to achieve that level of financial peace. If we think about our 7 grades of financial wellbeing, it's really comforting to know that. And I'm looking forward to getting to the 7th grade, which is financial contribution, and being able to to pay it forward, continue to keep doing that work. And yeah, our story is a boring one. I was happy to share it for the 350th show, but I'm really passionate about lifestyle design and the work that you and I are doing. And I want to congratulate you and also Ibis and the crew for our 350th. You guys are amazing, Emma, in terms of pulling all this together. So thank you very much, guys. And hopefully that inspires one or hopefully more people to plan to become what they plan to become. That's why I shared my story.
Yeah, well said, mate. I think the planning is uber critical in this discussion. I think you are the epitome of that. So, mate, off you go. Go and hang out with your family. And until next week for me, mate.
Yes, knowledge is empowering, but only you act on it. And I'll see you in a few weeks' time.
See you in a few weeks. Good on you, buddy. See you, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
See you next week, folks.
Hey there folks, Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.